Hi, I'm Gibson Quarter, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's November 24th, 2020. I'm John Swinimer. If you have a comment, criticism, or question, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Gibson Quarter about WhitCAF 2020. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, and don't forget to check out the new YouTube channel. Hosted by the Whitby Library in Whitby, Ontario, the annual Comic Arts Festival celebrates comic book creators and makers in a variety of fun and entertaining activities, including exhibits, panels, readings, artist alley, contests, and more. Gibson is a comic book artist-illustrator working out of the Raid Studio in Toronto. He's best known for illustration work on the War on Drugs strips with writer Alan Grant and the European magazine Wasted. Gibson is a regular artist on the Organ Grinder stories in the Undertow comic from Seventh Wave. He's worked with a number of other books and publishers such as Dynamite Entertainment, Captain Canuck, Heroes of the North, and numerous other European magazines like Frogman, Northern Lights, and Future Quake. So without further ado, here's my chat with Gibson Quarter about WhitCAF 2020. Gibson Quarter, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
You're more than welcome.
Appreciate your time. To catch you off guard and ask you a little bit more of a personal question, I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you remember reading?
The first one that I remember reading that significantly impacted me, so therefore I remember it, would probably be X-Men, I believe it's 113, where it was the John Byrne, Chris Claremont days, and Beast and I think Jean Grey were stuck in a snowstorm while the rest of the X-Men were stuck in the Savage Land.
Oh, that's a classic one for sure.
Yeah. Well, then that's the way to start, because those were classic, amazing comics, and that just got me hooked. And luckily, I was at the start of that really, really good, strong run that pretty much put the X-Men on the map, like to where they're a society phenomenon today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. So, want to talk about your newest project that you're promoting. Wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I'd love to tell you it's out and about already, but I think the last time we spoke and the last time I was promoting some of the Raid anthologies. I've got work in Raid, the studio book that we put out. It's more of an art anthology type book. And Raid 4, it was set to come out this year, but of course that didn't happen. It was going to launch at Fan Expo. We're waiting, obviously, now to figure out how and when we're going to launch it, because ideally we'd like to do it with more physical launches in shows and things of that nature, as well as, your online and your comic shops. So that's what I'm promoting and working on right now is Raid for the anthology.
Cool. Good stuff. Wonder if you could talk a little bit how you got your start in making comic books.
I'll give you the Coles Notes version is Frank Quitely is responsible for everything. Because so I was a huge Frank Quitely fan way back in the days of when he was just breaking in with the Authority, and that first issue he did kind of blew my mind. So I decided I would track down some of the other work he'd done, and he was such a newcomer at that point in time that most of the work I found was the internet was just getting going to Google. It wasn't really a thing for searching very well, but I was able to track down this tiny little weed comic book in Scotland that he did a bunch of pages for. And so I emailed over and waited a couple days, got a reply. Long story short, I mentioned, the guy kind of said, why do you want only these specific Frank Quitely books? Because I had said, give me anything he's ever done and I'll buy it. Just tell me what I owe you. And I explained I was an artist and that's why he was a big influence. They asked if they could see a couple of my pages or if I had any samples. I sent them over, and a day later I got 3 scripts to choose from written by Alan Grant. As you may know, wrote Batman Forever with Mandrake, and so I was just blown away as a newcomer. And I said, sure. I picked the one strip that I thought could be an ongoing, and that turned out to be War on Drugs with Johnny K. Kind of like the Judge Dredd of the marijuana comic. He was always busting stoners in a comical way. Yeah, I think the tagline was U.S. government, do as you're told, which pretty much sold me right there, right?
That's neat.
Yeah. So, and then long story short, that's kind of my first published work. And through that connection, the person that was running it at the time was a guy named Jamie Grant, who was personal friends of Vince Deegan, which is Frank Whiteley's real name, and who wound up being his colorist on all the All-Star Superman books. And it was just an amazing fortuitous coincidence that kind of put my life on a different trajectory. So
that's really cool. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have any advice for newcomers who want to make their own comic books.
Newcomers who want to make their own, obviously, I mean, the first thing, I guess I'd ask if you're talking about artists or writers or just creatives in general.
Just in general, like who someone's inspired going, gosh, I should do my own thing. What do you recommend they do?
Yeah. Well, I guess, if you're a writer, you need to find an artist or figure out how to work it. And if you're an artist, there's lots of writers. But the biggest thing I think they can do, and this one thing that social media has helped with immensely, because it wasn't really too prevalent when I had first started out. But now, luckily, with a website and a social media account, you can put up pretty much anything you like, Reddit, things of that nature, right? You can get your work out there. I highly recommend people, develop something that they think that they want to do, run it by a few people maybe in the business or the industry that can give you a couple pointers. Don't be scared of getting feedback and incorporating it, but then just get the work out there, because these things will find a market. It's such a broad world out there. You see little cartoons that suddenly go viral, and next thing you know, offers come flooding in for other work. And that's really, I guess, what I would say to creatives, not necessarily artists or writers, but just in general. Try and get your work out there. Don't be afraid. It's intimidating, but published work is better than no work, and you can do that now just with a scanner and a computer website kind of thing.
That's good advice. I want to take a step back and ask you a more philosophical question. Wondering what you think about the role that libraries and library events like WhitCAF and others play in fostering comic books and their creation.
Well, I think libraries play a huge role because obviously they foster reading, and most of the libraries, the one great thing about graphic novels having such a boom in the last 10 years is you can get really good comics and graphic novels at libraries to check out. So you can just immerse yourself in styles from the super cartoony Scotty Young type stuff to Frank Whiteley's work to a whole bunch of different art styles and subjects, right? So I use the library. I use the library here in Toronto all the time. And in WhitCAF events and things of that nature, Mississauga Library, things of that, they really help promote, I think, take some of the mysticism out of comics when you can, read the books and see the people creating them and talk to how it's done. I think it's very important for the grassroots of the industry, and I love it. I love doing library shows, and I really miss the fact that we weren't able to do WhitCAF because of COVID.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if you have any favorite memories, though, from past events that you can share.
Nothing springs to mind in particular. I thought the WhitCAF was a great show. I guess the memory that does swing to mind, and I don't know how topical this is, but my aunt came to see me. She lives in Oshawa, so she came out to the last WhitCAF show and surprised me and showed up, and that was really, really nice. So that would probably be one of my more favorite show memories as it pertains to library shows. Yeah.
Nice. That's a good one.
I don't know if that counts, John, but
yeah, absolutely. Because I think what it does, just because maybe for people who don't know, there is no fee to enter these library events. You just are browsing the library as opposed to conventions or other, paid events, right? There's a dichotomy there between.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point. Actually, I hadn't really even factored that in, John. But you're right. You get, I guess, if this sounds correct, library shows are a little more wholesome in that you get a lot more of a diverse kind of, a lot more kids, a lot more people that maybe weren't into comics but are suddenly realizing, hey, this is pretty cool, that you don't get at Fan Expo or the New York, Calgary Con or whatever. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I did talk to and made a number of new fans, and I personally love just chit-chatting with kids that have an artistic vibe, because I remember being that kid, awkward and had no one to talk to that shared my interests when I was young. So I look forward to that aspect at library shows for sure.
Good stuff. Now, I'm wondering if you can talk about any future projects that you have coming up.
Sure. Well, the one that I'll hint at a little bit, I won't talk about it too interestingly, is that I've used the time, or starting to use the time during this whole COVID lockdown and what it did to the industry and the publishing, to kind of do my own thing, which I'd had in the back of my head for a long time, the science fiction thing that I wanted to do. I was never convinced I was a good enough writer, but a couple things have come together, and with help from my studio mates at Raid and some other folks, I think I will be kind of within about a year or so launching a book that I'll be real proud of, kind of a sci-fi with a female lead that I've always kind of wanted to do. So.
Okay.
If
So
I could be a
where?
little more mysterious, I'll try, but I
Well,
don't want to talk too much about it until I have more concrete things to back up on my socials. But that's one thing that I've really, kind of navel gazed over the last little while when things weren't going so well, and decided that's something I really want to do and make sure I get out there. And now that I have extra time, I've really been able to focus on it. So
Sure.
it will be coming. Whereas before it was just kind of one of my ideas for a future day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, completely understandable. Now, you mentioned social media. Where can people find you online to find out about this future project and other work that you might be working on?
Sure. Well, I have a blog. The easiest way to find that would just be, and believe it or not, I'm one of the old blog guys I love it. It's just Google Gibson Quarter and 2 words and it'll pop right up. But I'm on Instagram, which is probably the best one, which is Gibson_Quarter, I believe. And same with Twitter as well.
Sounds good. Well, Gibson, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
I really do want to go back to the point that libraries are a valuable resource, and the fact that folks get to come in and it's free and kind of view us in a con setting, I think is real beneficial and something that I'm looking forward to getting back to the next bunch of library shows when we can finally talk and meet and not have to worry about getting sick.
Thanks to Gibson for the chat. You can discover more about Gibson on Twitter at Gibson Quarter and on Instagram at Gibson_Quarter and online at GibsonQuarter27art.blogspot.com. And you can discover more about WhitCAF 2020 at whitbylibrary.ca/WhitCAF. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube, so please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2020.